Hello everybody, welcome back to another video with Lim Reviews. Now in today's video, we're going to be checking out two of Narzo, or we should say realme's latest devices here in Malaysia. They are both 5G enabled and it's called the Narzo 50 and the Narzo 50 Pro. Now I do have the boxes here with me and they are actually quite a bit different here. In terms of the pricing alone, they're also quite affordable. So I would say that if you are looking for a 5G enabled device without having a lot of budget, I think this video might actually help you out. Now with that said, let's jump right away and start off with the video. Now first things first, we have to talk a bit about the price because pricing here is actually very interesting. Now on the base Narzo 50, it is actually retailing here in Malaysia for RM1099, whereas the Pro version is just 200 ringgit more at RM1299. Now me personally, I've used these devices for a couple of days now, so I do feel that the 200 ringgit difference is really too small, to be honest. You should just go ahead. I'm going to tell it to you now and just get the Pro. But let me share more about these devices. Now the second thing here we should check out is of course in terms of the design. Now if we take a look at these devices here, they do look very different in terms of design. Now this flat one is actually the non-Pro, and the bluish one here with curved sides is the Pro. Starting with the non-Pro, the Narzo 55G, we have flat sides, a flat back, everything is just flat. The design elements are all flat and I kind of like it because it has this very simplistic minimalist kind of look. In terms of the back panel here, although it is matte-ish materials, I did notice after using it for a couple of days now that it tends to capture a little bit of my sweat or smudges on the back, so you might still see that although it is a completely matte material. Now in terms of the camera bump, it's very minor, very slim here. And yes, Realme or Narzo did mention that this is a very slim device, so it's 8.1 millimeters. And in terms of the weight, it's 190 grams in case you are wondering. Now just taking a look at the sides here, we notice that we do have a side-mounted fingerprint scanner. If you move on to the bottom, this is where it gets interesting. You get your Type-C port, you get your stereo speakers, and you also get the headphone jack. So definitely a plus point there because both the headphone jack and stereo speakers are on board. But other than that, this is how it looks like. If you look really close on the design itself, you'll notice that it has sort of like this Kevlar kind of design elements going on. Overall, I like it, guys. It's a very simplistic and nice design here. What do you think? Let's move on and check out the Pro version. Alright, so the Pro version here is very different because it is like really in terms of a curved kind of element. So you see that we have curved sides on both the edges here that is supposed to, give you a more comfortable grip with just one hand. Apart from that, if you look at the sides again, this is where it's a little bit different. Now on the right here, you notice you only have a power lock button, and that is because it's using an in-display fingerprint scanner. So the way they unlock are different. If you move on to the bottom, this is a very nice good story here because you have the Type-C port, you also have stereo speakers plus headphone jack combination, guys. So on both devices, I definitely have to give a thumbs up to Narzo or Realme because they both come with that stereo speakers with headphone jack combo. Other than that, yep, again, this is also a matte-ish material, but the good news here is that it does not capture any smudges at all. The matte is a bit different here. So yep, putting it side by side once again, this is the Narzo 50 and the blue one is the Narzo 50 Pro. Alright, let's move on and talk a little bit about the displays at the front, guys, because the display is also very different. Now, we're going to start off straight up with the Narzo 50. On the front here, we do have a 1080p display. It supports a 90Hz refresh rate, 180Hz touch sampling rate, but unfortunately, it only carries an IPS LCD display. The colors does not pop like it usually does. So yeah, I think everything is great. If you are using your phone mostly indoors, I think you will not find this a major issue. But if you really appreciate watching a lot of videos on a nice clean display, I'm afraid that you have to go for the Pro for that because it does carry a much nicer AMOLED display. Now, if you just notice a very quick difference between the two, it's actually slightly smaller here on the Narzo 50 Pro. Now, this is only 6.4 inches, but it also has a resolution of 1080p. It also comes with a 90Hz refresh rate. But in terms of the touch sampling rate, it's also a little bit higher here. It's 360Hz. And just in terms of the colors, guys, the Super AMOLED panel here is just way better on the Narzo 50 Pro. Everything just looks much better. Nothing to say about that. Now moving on, let's talk a little bit about the processors because again, they are quite different in terms of these devices. So starting off with the non-Pro version, the Narzo 55G, what it has is that it's powered by a Dimensity 810. It has 6 GB of internal RAM, and of course you also have 128 GB of internal memory. Now the good news here is that the memory here is expandable via micro SD all the way up to 1 TB, and I think that is great to always support micro SD here. Now moving on to the Narzo 50 Pro. Now this is coming in with 8 GB of RAM straight off the bat, so already 2 GB higher than the non-Pro. You also get 128 GB of internal memory, but the thing is, it does not support expandable memory. So again, if memory is your main concern, you might want to check out the Narzo 50 instead. Alright, so in terms of performance, how do they perform on a daily? Well, honestly speaking, you already know that the 810 here is a very, very decent processor. It's a very good entry-level sort of 5G, kind of processor. So if you're going to be playing a lot of games, it's actually quite workable and quite smooth if you select the basic kind of graphics settings. So that's that. In terms of the 50 Pro here, of course, you can take things a little bit better, have a slightly better graphics and all that. I'm sure you might already be familiar with the Dimensity 920. It has proven to be a very efficient, sort of like entry to mid-level kind of processor. So that's great here as well. I'm going to show you guys a couple of, screenshots here to see the benchmark scores. I'm going to show you how the highest graphics that is supported in Mobile Legends as well as PUBG. So you have a brief idea on what kind of graphics is supported by both the Narzo 50 as well as the Narzo 50 Pro. Alright, so moving on, we're going to move on to the camera department. And again, they are quite different here because you only have a dual camera setup on the Narzo 50, whereas you have a triple camera setup on the 50 Pro. Now the main difference here is that this 50 Pro here comes with an ultra wide. So just in terms of the sensors alone, you have a 48 megapixel main sensor here and a 2 megapixel depth on the Narzo 50, whereas on the 50 Pro you have a same 48 megapixel main sensor. You also have a 2 megapixel macro lens, but you do have that additional 8 megapixel ultra wide sensor. Now in terms of the main sensor, although they are both carrying a similar specification, 48 megapixel sensor, I noticed that the photos taken during the day as well as during the night is very different for both devices here. Now on certain instances, I noticed that it was a little bit better on the Narzo 50 Pro, but surprise, surprise, on certain instances, it was also a little bit better on the Narzo 50. So I'm going to put the pictures for you up on your screen side by side so you have a rough idea on what kind of images you can expect from both devices. But again, they are quite entry-level kind of thing, and of course, I would say that for this kind of pricing, to be able to get these kind of photos, it's actually quite decent and quite standard these days. But you guys be the judge and check out which device here actually perform better in terms of the camera images. Now moving on to the final point, we should talk a little bit about the batteries in both devices. Well, both devices actually carry the same 5000 mAh battery. They also both support 33-watt dart charge, which is able to charge up the devices fairly quick. I know for a fact that the Narzo 50 Pro here is able to do 0 to 50% in approximately 30 minutes. So again, quite good there. But yeah, that's the kind of battery you can expect from these devices. Now, last but not least, one final point that I should mention here is that in terms of the user experience, you do get an X-axis haptics engine on this 50 Pro, and I think that really changes everything. It just makes interacting with the device so much better on the Narzo 50 Pro. Alright guys, so at the end of the day, which device should you pick? Should you go for the Narzo 50 or should you go for the Narzo 50 Pro? Well, honestly speaking, I would say that if your budget is really very, very tight and you can only afford the amount of money that the Narzo 50 is asking, well, this device here is actually a fairly good device. The only downside I would say is that the display is not as good as a Super AMOLED display, but overall you're still getting a very decent set of features on the Narzo 50, especially if you want that 5G. Now moving on to the Narzo 50 Pro here, I think this is a much better value proposition. For just 200 ringgit more at RM1299, you get a very good amount of features on this little guy right here. Apart from the awesome AMOLED display, you also have a decent set of sensors at the back with an ultra wide. You also have the in-display fingerprint scanner, and the Dimensity 920 5G has already proven is one of the best entry to mid-level kind of processors. But let me know what you guys think about these devices. Are these something that you might be checking out? Let me know down in the comment section below. Of course, thank you for staying all the way to the end, and I definitely hope to see you guys in the next one. Stay safe, everybody. Bye!